Hi, everybody. I'm doing my first real TikTok live. I tried it last night, but that was for less than a minute, so it doesn't really count. Please do whatever people do in order to contribute to this, which I don't really know because it's my first. But I just hit 1,000 followers, so that's great. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is something that I figured I could do, like my podcast my podcast topics here first. You could always go and listen to the Dr. Psych Mom show wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Google, like everything. So thank you for the likes, whoever's doing that. Thank you so much, because I don't know what I'm doing yet on this. So anyway, I work with couples, so I'm a psychologist. I work in private practice. I do therapy and coaching. And one thing that I work on a lot is sex and intimacy issues with couples. And one thing that women really say about men, and probably you will know this from being in a relationship, which is most of the people who follow me, like women can tend to say that men are just kind of slaves to their hormones and they think with their, you know what, and basically it's just biological. And so kind of that's said in order to minimize like the genuineness or the authenticity of the man wanting to be intimate, right? So but this is crazy if you really think about it, because any mammal is a slave to its hormones. I mean, and women are extremely influenced by their hormones. I mean, look at over different times of the month, your wife or girlfriend is going to have completely different levels of sexual desire, because that's just how hormones work. The point of us being on this planet evolutionarily and biologically, not in any sort of spiritual sense, which I don't get into, is to procreate, right? To perpetuate our species and pass on our genetic material. So for the first 2 weeks of her cycle, your wife is going to be into intimacy more so than in the latter 2 weeks. So pre-ovulation, particularly in the couple of days right prior to and including ovulation, when she can get pregnant, theoretically, that's when she's going to be the happiest with you. And there's all sorts of interesting experiments that show that women are objectively rated more attractive by other people when they're ovulating. Their voices are objectively higher pitched. They wear different kind of clothes that are more feminine. Like, these are actual studies that are done, and they are just like, they feel better. They internally feel better, happier. They rate themselves as more attractive. Why? Because this is right when they can procreate. So what about after that? What about in the second half of the cycle, the usually on average 28-day menstrual cycle? In the latter half, the woman cannot procreate anymore. The ovulation's over. So kind of it slows down until the PMS week, when things are pretty bad. And she feels unattractive. She acts more depressed. If she tends toward depression, especially, then the week before her period is going to be pretty bad. And there's even something called PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is like PMS but worse and diagnosable. I mean, there was like a court case of the UK where somebody was acquitted of manslaughter versus murder, because of PMDD. Or rather convicted. So it was like a lesser sentence because she had a history of PMDD. And they were just like, well, basically her hormones did it, So, I mean, this is a real thing. And particularly women that already struggle with depression are going to be way more responsive to the mood changes that are characteristic of the varied parts of the menstrual cycle. So this is real. So if your wife thinks that the only reason that she wants to thank you for following me. Somebody followed me. Please do follow me, everybody, if you're listening, if you're watching. But if your wife thinks that the only reason that you want to be intimate is your hormone levels and your testosterone and your biology, that's why she wants to be intimate too, when she does or when she doesn't. Of course, there are deeper reasons that people want to be intimate, and that's what I talk about a lot, is you can't just say basically, well, you know, the couple days I'm ovulating out of the month, it's game on, and the rest of the time, fuck it. Like, that would not be kind, right? That isn't being a loving team player. It also doesn't really have to do with reality, because most women can get in the mood if they try to get in the mood with a loving partner, you know? So that's when I talk about spontaneous desire versus responsive desire. Spontaneous desire is what men have more, and women that are not in monogamy, that's when you feel desire and then you want to be close, right? So the order is first you feel desire and then you want to be intimate. But responsive desire is the opposite. You start to be intimate and then you experience desire. So this is what most women have within monogamy. And as they age, as women age, it gets more and more only responsive desire versus any spontaneous desire. Maybe a little spontaneous when you're ovulating. So basically everybody is kind of influenced by their hormones massively. And if people say that they're not, this is just because they haven't really been tracking the course of their cycle. I mean, if women say that they're not, most men say, yes, my testosterone impacts if I want to have sex. That's pretty much a given. And when men are low T, by the way, they don't want to have sex. So, I mean, fairly obvious. Hormones are a really big thing, and they're big for both. So it doesn't do anybody any good to downplay the existence of genuine biologically and evolutionarily mediated impacts, you know, such as hormones, right? And so if you are somebody who wants to work on your sex life, do you just have to respond to the biological call of your hormones? Obviously not. Like, you can intentionally and mindfully make space in your life to be intimate, you know? And so while it may not feel like so wonderful and stars aligning for women in the premenstrual week as it does in the ovulation week, that doesn't mean that you cannot get yourself into a headspace where you're going to try to get in the mood. You know, like, this isn't like any new idea. It used to be, of course, that sexual contact was a part of marriage. This is really kind of no longer in the marital contract, the implicit contract. And most people are that's to their detriment. You know, they do not have those times to be close then, because it's thought that if you don't have 100% spontaneous desire, which again, many women do not experience within monogamy, no matter how awesome the guy is, then you shouldn't be doing it. But if you can't experience it without starting to do it, and I'm just talking about even foreplay, just kind of seeing if you're in the mood, then how are you ever really going to ever be close? You know, so yeah, I'm sure that if you're a woman watching this, I'm sure that your husband could work on being more romantic. I'm sure that he can work on a lot of things. But that does not necessarily have much to do with why you want to be intimate or not, which may be a lot more related to biology, hormones, and general stress, aging, depression, anxiety, birth control, antidepressants. There's like a million variables that impact female libido. And if you never get yourself into the space where you even want to try to be intimate, then there's kind of no way to do anything about this. You know, then you're really at an impasse. And it's the impasse that most of my couples clients find themselves in, where the woman says, well, look, we have these issues in the relationship, and I'm sure that when we fix these issues, then I'll want to do it. But then they fix those issues, and they certainly fix them a little bit, and she doesn't want to do it in any sort of linear fashion where, like, she says the chores are the problem, right? So he does more chores. Any man who's willing to go to couples counseling is willing to try to do more chores, in my experience. But he does the more chores, you know, and then she doesn't experience more desire because she's not thinking about all the variables that impact her desire levels. That's the truth. You know, she's not thinking that this has so much more to do with how she feels internally on her own than the relationship. There's plenty of women in completely loving, really, oh, look, Dad's starting over. Hi, Dad's starting over. Thanks for watching. I hope you're still watching for this second. And Dad starting over got me a lot of likes, so he's cool. Follow Dad starting over. He's awesome. But anyway, so a lot of women think, and actually, Dad Starting Over just did something about this. Howdy. If you're free, I'll invite you to live Dad Starting Over. Tell me if you are. I don't know. It's early in the morning, but you may be. But anyway, as I was saying, so many people think that you are not free. Oh, well, we'll plan something. So anyway, so many people think that their sex drive is totally mediated by the fact that, the relationship isn't perfect. Well, guess what? No relationship is perfect. And if you're waiting to have a better sex life because you've worked on the emotions long enough, so many people have like an incredibly expensive mistake to this end when they go to years of couples counseling that only focuses on emotion and does not talk about the biological components of sexuality and does not directly address the disparities in sex drive at all. So there's so many people that end up seeing me and they say things that are pretty tragic that are like, well, we went to couples counseling for 18 months, like every week. Can you imagine the money, right? And the time and the babysitters or whatever, and what they could have accomplished in that time. And yeah, we learned how to say a lot of more I statements, and I statements are when you say, I feel sad instead of you bitch or whatever. I mean, great, like that's positive. But basically, we are no closer in any meaningful sense, and our sex life problems have even worsened, because it's been 18 more months without. So there's so many people that go to like egregious amounts of couples counseling, and they're just waiting for somehow, because the couples counselor says, because that's how they've been trained, that if we work on the emotional issues and we work on the communication issues, that magically our sex life issues will follow and they will just remediate. How? I mean, I work with all sorts of people. I work with people who were raised in very sex negative environments, such as super religious environments, or environments where they were trained by one or both parents to fear the opposite sex, or like men that had moms who said, like, whatever you do, don't be like a sexual predator. And so they're like embarrassed of their own sexuality, coupled with women who are trained to view men as sexual predators. And so if sex is never really discussed, then how exactly would improving communication or chore division or parenting issues, how would that lead to an increase in romantic or sexual closeness? It just doesn't. It makes you better at co-parenting, and quite honestly, sometimes I think it facilitates a divorce, because I have seen numerous times that within couples counseling, the man learns to understand emotions better, thereby he actually becomes a better dad, which is fucking great. I mean, that is great for him to become a better dad. She sees him become a better dad, and then she's like, well, I guess we could co-parent after divorce, because look who's can talk about feelings now. Great. And then they separate because it was not, and I mean, if the marriage was really terrible, fine. Okay, I understand you have to separate. But there's a lot of marriages where I think there's an inflection point, there's a window where you can work on the romantic or sexual component of the relationship. But if in that time you're only really learning how to co-parent better and how to split the household chores better and how to communicate like better business people, if basically all the skills that you're learning in couples counseling would make you a better boss, well, that's great. I'm glad you're going to be a better boss. But that is not really why, particularly men and or the person with the physical touch, love language, or the higher libido would, that's not why they're in couples counseling. So, it's really a shame that people do not go into couples counseling and say things like, okay, how are we going to address the sexual issues? And that isn't all that should be addressed. But if you are in couples counseling or considering it, first of all, if there are sexual issues, you should go to somebody who directly advertises, that they work with sexual issues. And that's like me. That's all the therapists that I hire in my practice, Best Life Behavioral Health. But also, so like everybody can't see me or can't see my therapist therapists. So you want to go in and say, I certainly want to work on the communication, the emotional component, the chores, whatever, but I also want to work on our sex life. Is that something that you could help us with? Because otherwise you're really going to be spinning your wheels, and to some extent, I really do think that many people, I see this happen, they think that magically working on the emotion is going to is going to change the physical intimacy, and that just does not happen. It just doesn't happen, because there are so many directly sexual issues that need to be addressed. That they're not in any other arena. They're only in the sexual arena. Again, shame, sexual self-concept. Frequently, men who are late bloomers have specific issues with kind of subconsciously wanting to make up for lost time with their wife and putting undue pressure on her. The wives have body image issues. They don't know how their hormones or their biology or their menstrual cycle influences their desire levels. They don't even know about responsive desire. They basically feel that if they don't look at their husband of 10 years and just want to bang, then that must be his problem, or maybe they're just not meant to be, or maybe he doesn't do enough around the house. That's like complete bullshit. Like, that has nothing to do with how human beings operate. Within monogamy, it is like incredibly rare for a woman to feel like that super turned on feeling without deciding to get herself into the mood. That doesn't mean she's not attracted to you. Men don't understand this at all, that a woman can look at a man and be like, oh, objectively, he's hot, and not want to have sex with him, because that's not how men are. If a man sees a woman, he's like, objectively she's hot, and thus I obviously want to have sex with her. Like that. There's no way to divide those. They could be like, I'm married, so sucks for me. But and that is a good point, by the way, when I finish what I'm saying. But anyway, they want to have sex with her. But somebody said women are just tired most of the time. That's a good point, but they aren't just tired. A lot of women, many more women than you realize, there's an extremely high prevalence of depression and certainly depressive symptoms among women. And one of those manifests as fatigue. So that's a core symptom of depression. Also, it's extremely physiologically taxing to be in any of the stages of parenting small children. Obviously, pregnancy and nursing are super depleting, but even just having small children around you all the time are. So, yes, women are super tired a lot of the time, and that is also something that could be understood biologically, instead of the woman just saying, oh, I'm tired because he doesn't do enough around the house. So all of these are good. They're good things to discuss when you are in couples counseling that is designed to address sexual issues. You can't just address the other issues and somehow expect the sexual ones to be addressed. So, anyway, where do you go from here if you're struggling with any sexual disparities? Well, obviously, I said that couples counseling could be useful if it addresses sexual issues. Also, even just like reading up and learning about female biology and hormones and responsive desire can be super useful. These are terms that not everybody knows or understands. I write a lot about it on my site, drpsychmom.com. I have my podcast where I talk about it a lot. But a lot of guys just think that if the woman does not experience this immediate desire, that she must not be attracted to them. But that's not the case. As I was saying before I tried to answer a commenter, women can look at a guy and be like, oh yeah, he's hot, and experience nothing. And that's the usual, by the way. That is the usual for a monogamous woman. If she looks at a guy, she's like, oh, he's cute. Yep, he's hot. Just like she would look at another woman and be like, oh, she's hot too. Doesn't mean she's a lesbian. Doesn't mean she wants to sleep with the woman. Doesn't mean she wants to sleep with the man. It's so different for men that it's hard for them to empathize with what the woman thinks, especially if she makes any kind of funny comment about like how she would do that or she would be with him. That's frequently just funny comments that have to do with literally nothing in the known world. So yeah, I could go on for hours about the differences in how men and women view sex, view attraction, view desire. Good morning from San Francisco. Somebody is awake early, very early. Thank you for following. So yeah, like, another big one, I had a TikTok about this, is like a lot of men work out because they think that if they get a hotter body, their wife is going to want to have sex more. And then, like, the majority of them, I mean, if they're already in a healthy marriage and, like, their wife's number one complaint was literally that they were extremely overweight, sure, then they're going to get laid more. But if they're, like, a reasonable looking guy and they just, like, get a little more buff or something, the woman probably isn't going to notice, first of all, just like how you don't notice if she gains 5 pounds, she doesn't notice if you gain 5 pounds of muscle. But besides that, it's not, that does not counteract monogamy. You know, like, it's the same thing. Like, when a guy works out, he's like, oh my God, like, I'm doing this, I'm going to get hotter. If she's more attracted to me, she's going to want more sex. No, you're still you know, you're still the same monogamous guy. So, like, her desire has to do with how she feels internally. And if she does the work to decide that she wants to get in a place where she can get turned on, which is understanding responsive desire, which is understanding where she is in her cycle, which is honestly just feeling closer so that she can then get herself into the mood. So it's not completely wrong that working on the emotional component is going to help the sex life, but then there has to be a bridge built where the sex life is directly addressed. So if a woman feels that you are like some kind of asshole and you never take her out and you don't listen when she talks and you really don't help out much and you're really pretty insensitive, I'm addressing Jacob's comment here about what does change things. So if she feels that you're kind of in your own world, super selfish, and in fact, ironically, going to the gym can even make a woman be like, look at Selfish here. Not only is he doing his golf, and not only is he doing his pickup basketball, not only is he doing all that shit, but now he's going to the gym for 2 hours a day. What the hell? Who's taking care of the kids? So then she's going to be like way turned off by your gym body, by the way. But if she feels close and connected, like you love her, like you're empathizing with her, like you are like really in it with her, like a team member, that's the thing women want the most, is to feel like a little team. Like, here we are, we're all a team, we're a family. Here, the team is going to the pumpkin patch. Here, we're going to the fall festival, we're all on the same page. If she feels like that, right, and then she does the work to understand her own sexuality and the impact of monogamy, the impact of biology, the impact of hormones, the impact of her cycle, the impact of depression, of anxiety, of birth control, of all these things. And it's not like she's got to take like a college level course on this stuff. Like, this is like minor stuff that, like, not minor, but like, I mean, a couples counselor, a sex therapist can explain this stuff like pretty easily, you know. Then she's going to want to make use of that knowledge and get herself into a place where she actually wants to try to get in the mood. Now I'm getting some questions, so that's cool. What if you guys got back together, but she keeps bringing up the past? You need to listen to my podcast episode on empathic ruptures and how to truly apologize, because I could talk about that for hours too. How men say I'm sorry and then it's all supposed to be over, but for women, they really want to process it. And when men are like, oh, that sucks, that's not fair, it's like, man, you're heterosexual. A lot of shit's not going to be fair. Same for women. If you choose to be straight, you got to deal with a man that's in front of you. You can't make him more into a woman. And the same thing, you can't make a woman more into a man. Can't make a woman into somebody who does not want to process verbal. So anyway, that was a good question. I could talk about that in another live, about like what apology looks like to a woman and how to resolve empathic ruptures. And empathic rupture is when somebody felt you would be there for them in the past, but you weren't. And these are underlying lots of breakups and other issues. But anyway, so like very pragmatically, I see a lot of male viewers, so that's a lot of y'all like flow charts. You're very pragmatic in that way. So what does it really look like? Here's what it would look like. Here's what the flow chart looks like. You get into couples counseling, directly saying, so that's the first box, that you also want to work on sex. But the couples counselor and your wife are probably going to be like, well, I can't even talk about sex, you know, until we talk about our closeness, right? So then you, in the next box under that, you bust your ass for weeks, not months, weeks, talking about like everything that you have really done wrong in the relationship, because you're coachable, you have an open mind, you know you're not perfect. hopefully. And so we talk about those things. We actually try to go through them in a very open-minded way. And then within weeks, not months, certainly not years, but weeks, you start to bring up that your love language is physical touch. And you understand that hers is words of affirmation or quality time or whatever, but yours is physical touch. And you are bringing your A game to couples counseling and trying to rectify her issues. And so therefore you would really like it now to turn a bit to how she could bring her A game in the physical touch domain. And that is usually going to go pretty well if you're bringing your A game. A lot of guys are like, yeah, I showed up to couples counseling and I kind of basically stared out the window, and every so often I made a clever passive-aggressive jab about how maybe if I were getting laid, then I could communicate better. Is that bringing your A game? Is that how you act at work? No. You know, if you really try deeply to understand her perspective, unless your wife is a sociopath, which maybe y'all think that that's common, but it's not. It's really uncommon. You know, like, unless your wife is just a total sociopath or psychopath, which is even less common, she's going to understand when you're trying to get outside your comfort zone. There are so many guys who are open, who want their wife to be open-minded in bed, but then they're not open-minded out of bed. So it's like, if I have a post on this, you know, which is great, a summary of what I'm saying, which is if you want your wife to be more open-minded in the bedroom, you gotta be more open-minded outside the bedroom. So that means if she lacks empathy, you know, there's all levels of lacking empathy. Most people lack empathy. This isn't addressed to a commenter. If your wife lacks empathy, then you got to look in at the relationship. Does she completely lack empathy with the children? If so, maybe you got the rare sociopath. But if she's got friends and she's got kids and she's nice to everybody else, but she's just not empathic toward you, likely there have been empathic ruptures and breaches, and she's got her side of it to talk about too, and she feels alone and lonely and sad the same way as you do. Somebody said, how about before working on couples and each other, you should work on yourself first? Totally. Great. Go into individual counseling. This will expedite couples counseling dramatically, as well as impress the shit out of your wife. You know, as a big, you were talking about turn-ons for women. I'll tell y'all what's a turn-on for women. When I have an individual session with a man, I always do this at the end. I'm like, and if you want to tell your wife, here's a little summary of what to tell her. Because women love men plumbing the depths of their subconscious. If you want anything that's going to be an actual turn-on to your wife, it is her thinking that you are trying to grow as a person. That is just catnip to women. So if you share, if you proactively go into therapy, this is like shit that women brag about, by the way. If you want to know how weird women are, like if a woman drops that she is dating a man who's in therapy, everybody's like, oh my God, that's so great. I wish my ex would have gone to therapy. I wish my husband would go to therapy. My husband would never go to therapy. He's so close-minded about therapy. Women love, this is like the age of therapy, right? Women love men who are in individual therapy because they take that to mean, correctly or not, you know, hopefully correctly, that you're open-minded and willing to get feedback and that you're a coachable, open-minded kind of guy. And if you are seeing the right therapist, which does not mean, by the way, if you're in therapy and you just go in every week and they're like, oh yeah, like this guy said, I'm fine, I don't need therapy. Hopefully that's a joke. Yeah, if you're that kind of guy who's like, I'm fine, I don't need therapy, I don't need to work on anything in myself, everything was perfect for my whole life, my upbringing, the only problem's this bitch I'm married to. I mean, come on, like, what would you say if a woman said that? I'm fine, I'm totally fine, only problem's my husband. You know, this is not being open-minded. This is not being a guy that she can look up to. And of course, women want to look up to their husband. So if you do go to therapy, right? If you go to therapy and you come back with all of these epiphanies about yourself, oh my God, I realize that I have insecurity about this and this, that I'm guarded about this and this, and that my past influenced me, oh my God, in this and this way, she is going to be hanging on your every word like she didn't do since you were dating. And this, frequently, guys are like, how do I get my wife into couples counseling? I'm like, start coming. Literally start coming to see me. One of two things is going to happen. Either she's going to be so curious about what the hell you're saying about her that she's going to join, or she's going to be so genuinely impressed by your commitment to self-betterment that she's going to want to get in on that. And she may even start feeling bad about herself. Like, oh, well, I'm supposed to be the more emotionally minded person here. Why is he in therapy? And like, I'm not in therapy? That's kind of weird. And she's going to go. So very rarely do people start working with me with the eventual intention of a spouse joining, and the spouse doesn't join. They will usually join, even just to see what the hell is going on. And they will particularly join if the guy starts to have real changes in his life because of the therapy. So, for example, if a guy comes in and he's like, my wife won't sleep with me, that's certainly what I was going to say before. This is related. I'm not going to be there every week and be like, oh my God, it's so sad. Oh, she must have no reasons at all. That sucks for you. I feel so bad. World's smallest violin. What does that do for you? Like, what are you getting for your money then? Nothing. So if you're in therapy and you're just venting every week to somebody who's like, man, that sucks, get out. Like, why don't you donate that money instead or save it for your kids' college? So instead, you should be working with somebody who challenges you to really be your best self and to think about your own contribution to the marital issues. And if you come home and you say, I was working with my therapist, which is already a panty dropper. I was working with my therapist, and, my therapist helped me to understand your perspective about how you always said I didn't help out enough when the kids were young. I was really thinking about that, and you know what? I did not. You know what? I didn't. I really didn't. And I didn't because maybe my own dad didn't, and because maybe I didn't have a role model for it, or maybe I had my own resentment and bitterness, or I was terrified about losing my job at that point, so I was busting my ass. And you know what? Looking back, I really wish I would have helped in the middle of the night. I didn't understand about postpartum depression. I didn't understand about this. I didn't understand about that. And I'm sorry you felt so alone. Man, you think that she's going to be happy about you going to therapy? She's going to be thrilled because therapy just gave you an epiphany of the likes that she's never seen you have. Right? And then that woman is a hell of a lot likelier to join you in session because you're already showing progress made. You're already showing that you can be open-minded, that your perspective can change. So I cannot make this clearer. If you want your wife's perspective to change about intimacy, you got to change your perspective about something. Things are a two-way street. If you are closed-minded, she will be closed-minded. If you are rigid, she will be rigid. It's just going to be in a different venue. So obviously men are like, oh yeah, I'm so open-minded. I want to do all these different positions, all these different fetishes. Oh, that's cool. That's not actually being open-minded. That's called being a high libido man. What open-minded is listening to maybe her perspective and getting outside of your comfort zone, thinking like that you don't know everything about everything and that maybe she's right about these other things. So many open-minded guys just mean open-minded about sex. And then in other ways, they're closed-minded. So then your wife's going to be closed-minded about the things that matter less to her, such as the intimate life. So every marriage should obviously be, I shouldn't have to tell you that it's a two-way street and it's a dynamic. There are no marriages I've ever seen where I'm like, oh yeah, that guy's right and that woman is totally wrong, or vice versa. And that's why a lot of people come to me, because I'm pretty even-handed. And if you think that couples counseling would just be like your wife and the couples counselor being like, he's a dick. Wow, isn't he a dick? Yeah, he's a real big dick. No, that is not how it works. And if couples counseling has gone like that for you, then it was the wrong couples counselor, and you should find somebody more even-handed. So what is the overarching summary of the open-mindedness issue? Pick what your wife thinks you're closed-minded about and work on it like you would work on some work thing. Somebody said, I like your hair. Thank you. That is very nice of you. Pick what your wife would be most excited for you to work about. Like, what about like the wife's favorite topic? We don't travel enough. We don't do enough stuff with the kids. You're not involved enough with the children. These are all big ones. You're not excited about projects. This is huge. I hear this all the time. Every time I try to make a project, she says, around the house, every time I try to do something as a family, he's unenthusiastic. He's got an attitude. He says, how much that gonna cost? Blah, 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 blah. All right, fine. So why don't you say, oh, maybe I'm a little closed-minded about it. Maybe I should work on being more enthusiastic and open and generous as I would be if at work a coworker approached me with an idea. I probably wouldn't be like, well, that's a stupid idea, like all your stupid ideas, right? You would probably say something like, Oh, wow, sounds good. That's interesting. Oh, I'm excited to start, right? Why don't you say that shit at home, right? If you want your wife to say, I'm excited to try that new thing you want in bed, then why aren't you saying, I'm excited to try that new family adventure you planned for Sunday? It's like it's commonsensical. But when people are locked into their own corners, which in therapy we call polarized. So polarized means that each of you, you're looking at it very black and white. You're in opposing corners, and each of you has become more intensely almost caricatured on one side of the debate than you would be otherwise. So, for example, a woman that truly actually believes that sex should be an important part of the marriage, if you start to say that sex is the most important part of the marriage, then she'll be like, yeah, well, I don't think sex should even be in this marriage. Just because that's how human beings are, you know? Human beings are like that. Like one person is going to go into one corner, well, then the other person's going to go into the other corner. That's a big thing that couples counseling can help with, is to get you guys both into the middle ground, because most people are more in the middle ground than they would like to admit, you know? And another thing, I mean, the primary thing that couples counseling helps you work on is empathy. And if you think, yeah, I'm empathic and my wife isn't, I mean, she probably thinks the same about you, right? So there's really very few people in the world that do not respond to empathy, genuine empathy. And so if you come forward with more genuine empathy about your wife's position, then she's going to have more empathy about your position. There's a lot of people waiting for their spouse to make the first leap into being empathic. Why? I mean, that hasn't worked so far. So the better thing to do, the smarter thing to do really, is to work on your own empathy levels as much as possible, and then hope that, you know, your wife responds. Now, some marriages cannot be saved, especially because people wait until they have literally consulted with a divorce attorney before coming into couples counseling. This is most people. But if you get in soon enough, I mean, don't be like those people, you know, be somebody who proactively says, we aren't feeling close. Like, we don't have the connection that we used to have, and I wish that we did, and therefore I'm going to come into couples counseling before either one of us understands what the laws are for custody in this state, you know? I mean, that would be the better thing to do. All right, so I'm glad everybody followed me that did, and please do follow me if you didn't. And hopefully I can go live more frequently. And thank you, everybody, so much. All right, have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.